Welcome to the Lightforge. This is ADWCTA.
This is Merps, and we are 1 week into the LOE meta. And I like to say that we have more than a little bit of experience. Definitely,
Yeah.
I have a little bit more experience than you, right?
I mean, I think you have much more experience than me at this point. Even yesterday when we weren't streaming or doing anything, I just saw you, doing repeated arenas on my, buddy list on BattleNet.
So, between last night and the night before, I think I squeezed in about 12 arena runs. It was
Okay, Merps just played 12 arena runs off stream, including during times when I was streaming instead of joining me.
Well, I was a little bit not sober during that time, so I figured I shouldn't jump on and sort of mess you up.
I
Um,
went 2-3 with a priest during that time.
yeah, and then you played Shaman. It didn't seem like you were having fun, and I was like, I'm not gonna have fun either. I'm staying away from this. But
It's not a very
I
fun deck.
I've been playing a lot, and I think that right now it's a very fun time to be playing, and I think we can definitely make some comments. It's just about how the meta is going.
Yeah. I mean, okay. So it's been kind of building up, and as we suspected, the Wing 4 LOE didn't have the biggest impact on the meta. I don't know, maybe you disagree, but I don't think it had anything more than kind of a continuation of what the meta was like, just a little more intensely.
Yeah, I think so. We're only 1 week in, right? But I think that not much has changed, but you could say that a lot has changed. It's all relative because if you just look at it from a cursory glance, you could just say well, it's kind of the same thing that we've seen. Obviously, a couple new cards, but for people like us who play Arena all the freaking time, these small changes are really astronomical, in my opinion, anyways.
Okay. So what do you think is the biggest change since Wing 4 actually came out?
I think number one is we do see a greater diversity of classes. I don't know if this is the biggest change, but so that's one point that I definitely want to talk about. You see greater diversity of classes, which is typical, right? After an expansion hits,
Mm-hmm.
people are trying out new classes. The thing that is surprising is that you see greater diversity of classes at the higher win rates.
Yeah.
So before, I think, back in TGT, when you hit 10, 11 wins, it was kind of like, well, it's going to be Paladin, and it's not Paladin, it's going to be Mage or Rogue, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then
But it's mostly Paladin.
it's mostly Paladin. It was always
By
Paladin.
mage and rogue, you just mean paladin again.
Yeah, basically. But yeah, now I wouldn't say it's super common, but you see the priests, shamans, warriors at
Yeah.
10, 11 wins,
Uh huh.
and you're a little bit scared.
Warlocks.
Warlocks, yes, definitely using those as
Definitely.
well. Not hunters so much, but we'll talk about that in a second.
Hunter.
Yeah, so you see this greater diversity at the higher win rates, and it could mean a few things. So number one, I think it can mean that players are trying out new classes, or they're more willing to experiment when expansion comes out, which is cool. And number two, I think it just shows that kind of at least the ceiling for these classes is, they're all very high, and we've known that for a while. That priests and shamans are if you get a perfect draft, their ceiling is higher than ceilings for other classes. Warrior is definitely surprising, but I think we'll talk about this a little bit later.
Well,
Warrior
the
is
warrior ceiling was always really high. It used to be my second best class, right?
it
I
used
think
to,
I'd proven, I was. This is tooting my own horn, but I think I was the ceiling of warrior play back in Classic and
ooh,
Max.
wow.
I had not seen anyone else claim the averages that I had been putting out there, and then it all went to crap right as soon as GVG hit, and then it just kept dipping and dipping until I was probably among the infinite players, not even a better than average warrior player.
Right,
But it's
right.
back. It's back in such a big way. We were talking about it before, right? Last week with Crip, I think we all said warrior was the third worst class. I don't even know about that anymore. Just seeing it played against me, playing it a little more. I think it may even be more to number 5 or number 6. But I think calling it number 7 is even doing it a disservice just for what it can do. Just that burst and the flexibility. Um, Something I've noticed, and this may be why you're seeing more diversity at the top of the win rates now, is the the flexibility is becoming a really really important part in
Yes.
in this. I'm gonna call it a new meta because it's really the OE meta, but what it actually is it really feels more like the old meta. Like it feels like we're kind of stepping back into a more complicated and built out Nax meta almost in terms of the speed. Like it's not as fast as GVG or BRM, and it's not as slow as TGT. We're kind of back to like what was the old middle ground with a lot of new
Yeah.
cards and new mechanics. But
Yep.
the really interesting part about this to me is that there was a lot of snowbally things that you could have done with the Inspire mechanic if you had the board. And there was a lot less ways to remove the board because all of your like board clears and your just removals in general were down because of the offering rate change. And
Yes.
now that that's gone, replaced by a much smaller offering rate bonus for LOE, just because there's way less LOE cards, it kind of has rejuvenated the back and forth offense defense that you kind of see on the board. And so it's becoming even more important to be able to flexibly know how to play on the board and off the board, and when to accept that you're going to be off the board and when to save to go back on the board, rather than even in the GVG push it was just like get on the board, stay on the board, go fast. In
Right.
the TGT mode, it was kind of you opened up this kind of more attrition style, but you were still only going to win after you got back on the board. Now, the more like middle of the game burst, get back on the board, finish your opponent off stuff is just possible again.
Yeah. So let me ask, what do you think of this? Is this the way that you prefer to play, or and do you think that this way will stick?
Oh, I don't know if this way will stick. I love this way of playing because this is the way of playing where you can legitimately have all of the classes be doing okay. Like one thing
Yes.
I hated about TGT, and I love TGT and what it did for the complicatedness of the arena. What I hated about it is that it drove a wedge, like what I thought was a really large wedge between the top four classes and the bottom five classes, or the top four classes and the bottom four classes, and then there's this other theoretical class out there. But it was such a big difference maker when you have an Inspire mechanic that's the center of everything, and you're going to get like one or two, maybe three or four Inspire mechanics in every deck, and you're just not able to use it as well because your hero power is just less suited for the arena, and you can't like build a deck around your hero power as well in the arena as you could normally. It created what I thought was an unhealthy class divide. And that gap has closed. And by closed, I don't mean the bottom classes are the same as the top classes. I mean it's kind of now where it used to be before TGT was,
Yeah.
which is great, right? Now Warlock is a totally legit class. You know, I think Warrior is a legit class now, and that's what's good to see, right? Like my experience in LOE so far, even with the LOE bonus kicking up, it hasn't disrupted that.
Yeah. I think so. And this is something that like I'm not sure. Like the more I think about it, the more I don't know how much the meta is going to shift significantly, because this goes to the point that I want to make, my second point, how I'm
Hmm.
seeing a higher skill level. In my opinion,
Yeah.
I think I'm seeing a
Hmm.
higher skill level in the arena. And that ties into the point that we were talking about, because when you have this transitional period and you have these people playing around, a lot of the fact, like the cause of the transitional period is because people are not as good yet, so
Hmm.
they're gonna
Yep.
learn and they're gonna
So you're
shift.
saying it's better now in relation to when LOE Wing 1 came out, not in relation to when TGT was like at its prime?
I think it's consistently gotten better. So in relation to TGT at its prime and in relation to
Oh,
LOE
okay.
when it first came out,
Okay.
like
Because when
it's
LOE
just
first came out, we all agree that the skill level in the arena like dropped, as it always does whenever a new expansion comes
yes,
out.
yes, yes. But I think that the skill level in the arena is the highest it's ever been. Now,
Hmm.
this has certain implications. Number one, it's just harder. So you grinding out your wins, it's going to be harder for that. Number two, it's going to disincentivize new players from playing, right? Because they're going to more easily get crushed if
Hmm.
if better players. And number three, the point that we were talking about before, this meta shift and how it like will this sort of meta stick. I think that if you have higher skilled players playing earlier and kind of just like setting it already, because better players will know how to kind of manipulate cards, use cards,
Use
and
cards flexibly. They don't get tripped
yes,
up as much in terms of the whole, this card has a really good ability, let's hold it forever. Or, like, I don't care about the ability at all, I'm just going to play it on curve all the time. They have a better handle on that, even for the kind of the most basic card with text situation that you get faced with. Much less some of the more difficult decisions you need to make in the arena, like how to use a weapon or, things like that.
right. So if we assume that higher skill players are playing more, and just the skill level in the arena has been increased, then we might see the end point of this meta switch much sooner. We might be seeing it now. This could just be what the meta is because
Yeah.
the good players have already established it because they would establish it much faster.
Yeah, and I think not even with the good players, but just when adventures come out, I think this is usually the case, right? Like when BRM came out, when do you think the BRM meta settled? It was like 2 weeks, right? Like 3 weeks tops after the last win came out. It wasn't like,
Yeah.
when GVG came out, the meta kept moving for like the first month, right? When TGT came out, it kept moving for the first month before we said, okay, it's kind of settled. But when an adventure comes out, because people have been adjusting to it as it comes along, and because there's less cards to really get used to, the meta just settles pretty quickly. So I agree. I think the meta's, if it's not settled now, by the time the next Lightforge comes around, it'll be settled. Like,
Yeah.
it's not going to take until January before this thing gets settled. And then you can focus your next, God, 3 months, maybe even 4. I don't know how long it's going to be until the next expansion, but it's a lot of time to be kind of in the same meta.
Oh,
And
that's
it's
a little bit sad.
what's so sad? This is the best time to increase your skill level because you have a settled meta, you know what you're getting, and more than that, it's a very diverse meta, like we said. This isn't the TGT meta where if you're playing anything besides the top 4 classes, you're kind of gimping yourself, like quite markedly. Right now, there are so many classes to play where you're not terribly screwed. I would say that priest this is going to go a little into the next topic, but I would say there's maybe only 2 classes, possibly 3 classes that are kind of at the bottom right now that you kind of get a significant disadvantage for. But I mean, there's always going to be top classes, but just you close the wedge enough, right? And it's not like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm going to pick a warlock, and that's going to mean I get 2 more losses than if I pick a mage. It's going to be like, oh, I'm going to get like maybe 1 more loss, maybe half a game's more of a loss. And that's not as bad. That's not as much of a disincentive to use that class. And when the win rates are that close together, it kind of, you don't feel it as much, right? You play a lot, and then you gather stats, and then it'll show it. But when you're actually playing, you won't feel it run to run because each run is so different based on your deck and what you run into. And, like, if the perfect MCT happens to you twice in a game, or, a very well-placed owl after I buff my guy twice, that's what you feel way more than, like, oh, this class sucks.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so on to point number 3, and it's a little bit early. It just might be bias on my part, but I feel as if we're seeing more legendaries in the arena. What do you think?
Okay, I've seen more legendaries. I've played with more legendaries. I think that's definitely, anecdotally, from my experience, true. But I have a very small sample size. I don't want to make like sweeping, statements about anything like that. I wouldn't be surprised if Blizzard moved up the legendary offering rates in the arena. I think it used to be 1 out of every 4 decks or 1 out of every 3 decks would have 1 legendary.
Something
But
like that.
yeah, but since LoE has come out, it's been like I've seen triple legendary decks more often than I have ever seen triple legendary decks.
Right.
And these are triple legendary decks used against me, where I see all 3 legendary. So who knows how many of them we missed because the game ended before they drew and played all 3.
Yeah, and this is tough just because we're only a week into this new offering raid, and we only have so much experience. But this is something we'll keep an eye out, and I think it would be cool. When you talk about Hearthstone, you obviously want to win, but a lot of it is fun, right? We want to have more fun, and Legendaries just introduced this OMG factor into it, where you can have some crazy effects and also a lot of salt when your opponent just drops Dr. Boom or a Tyrion onto the board. I'm not saying it's fair, but there are a lot of unfair cards in Hearthstone already, aka every Paladin card.
It's
So,
true. It's true. I think
yep.
there was this joke on Reddit that's like, I'm gonna totally butcher it, but this made me laugh at the time. It's like, to make a 3/2 be balanced, as a warlock, you lose some life. Now let's make a 3/2 balanced for I don't know. God, I'm totally butchering it for like
Wow, this is the
this is
best
this is
joke at
awful.
A.
This is awful. To make it worth it for like a priest, let's make it have a death rattle or something. And now to make it the balance for the paladin, let's just give it a divine shield instead of making a drawback. I've just said that whole thing really awfully, and I apologize to whoever wrote that Reddit post in the most eloquent, much more eloquently than I just put it. But the idea is that Paladin's such a normal class that you just kind of give it overpowered cards, and they're just overpowered by itself without needing anything else.
Yep.
Whereas for the other classes, you kind of have to make up for the downside, or you have to like do other stuff to trigger its advantages, right? Like you have Rogue with that 5 mana 6/7, but you got a combo to trigger it. With the Paladin, I feel like at some point you're just gonna get a 5/7 6/7.
With Divine Shield.
Sure, with Divine Shield, and let's make the Divine Shield come back every time you use your hero power.
Nice. I like it. Inspire, Divine Shield, win the game.
Yeah. So that's kind of how the classes are designed, and in constructed, that may be how it's balanced. But in Arena, you got to really start playing with the rarity effects and kind of watching that when you're doing the effects. And I think we said this before, right? Paladin's been so well designed in LoE from my perspective, which is just that you gave it a really powerful card because I guess I don't know. By now I've kind of accepted that Paladins are always going to get really powerful cards, but at least this one takes a ton of skill to use well, like a lot of skill. This is like a top 1% skill card as far as common cards go. It may be the common card that requires the most skill. No, Ventricle Mercenary. But it's up there, right? It's like a top 1-2% skill card.
Right, and we're not saying it is ridiculously hard to use because sometimes they put down like their Capture Jormungandr and you're like, oh, Keeper of Uldaman.
But the chances in which you have to play it or like not play it or where to use it on or when to get the value on, I think it's a very high skill card.
Sure.
And it looks especially high skilled next to the other Paladin cards.
That is true. Or just muster for battle and win, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
As for the legendaries, we'll keep an eye out for that. But it is definitely something that I feel as if increased the offering rates of legendaries. So those are just kind of my general observations so far from me playing a ton of Hearthstone while watching 30 Rock. What about you? Do you have any observations?
By the way, Merps has now watched 30 Rock.
I have not.
Yet.
So I have been watching it and playing Hearthstone, and I probably pay a lot more attention to 30 Rock than Hearthstone, but still doing okay, still doing well.
I think there's something to it. I think there's definitely something to it where if you don't pay attention to the game and you just kind of like make moves based on instinct and you play it really, really fast, then your opponent thinks, oh, this guy doesn't know what he's doing, or oh, this guy's like, clearly on mobile or like doing something else, and they like kind of drop their guard. As opposed to where like if you're roping every turn, you give your opponent the time to think about it, and then you have to kind of play on your highest level.
This is so true. I got a 12-0 Shaman 2 nights ago.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't gotten a 12-0 Shaman in forever.
I was about to say, like, classic? Maybe not even then. Like, who knows? 12-0 Shamans are pretty impressive.
Yeah. And after I was done, I was like, oh, great. I just finished like
how
6
many
episodes of 30 Rock.
How many fire elementals did you have?
0.
Wow. That has never been done before. I think you should actually have screenshotted it, recorded it, put it up, sent it to Blizzard, say, hey, you have a bug. You're not supposed to be able to do this.
I think I did. I did screenshot it. I had a Power Mace. That was enough. Power Mace plus Mechs is enough.
Right. You got the Mech synergies. Okay. High synergy deck with Mechs. Or
There
just
you
a
go.
Power Mace with Mechs.
Just one Power Mace. That's good enough.
One synergy. The Power Mace is really powerful if you have 6-7 mechs to back that up.
Yeah.
Just because, right? Like by the time your next move comes, it's already turn 4, and so you can play pretty much any mech that you have. And so it and it's a free +2/+2, 2 mana's worth of tempo on the board. You can't come back from something like that, right? That's like an Argent Protector style tempo swing, and you had a weapon that dealt 6 damage for 3 mana
Right.
over the course of 2 turns before that. So it's just such a ridiculous swing.
The weapon itself would be decent for the cost, like good for the cost, right?
Yep.
Not so it's an overcosted Fiery War Axe. Fiery War Axe is a top, like tippy top premium card, so it's like a pretty decent card. But if you get that +2/+2 to hit, it's over. That is way too much value, and you can pick when you can use it. But anyways, we all know that Power Mace is a good card. But yeah. So if
All
you
right.
guys are
Sorry.
struggling, just watch some Netflix and don't pay attention. Like just disregard every other advice that we told you to, take your time, think out your plays. No, just play and watch some 30 Rock and you'll get 12 out.
There's Netflix and chill. There's Hearthstone and chill. Now there's Netflix and Hearthstone. You're
No
just,
chilling?
No chilling. No chilling. What? Are you gonna multitask that much? No chilling. No chilling. All right, let's move on to deep fried meta. It may sound like we've been just kind of overviewing the meta, and we kind of were, but in this deep fried meta, where we deep fried the meta, we're going to do a class rundown, kind of an update on our discussion last week. Last week, we kind of focused on the top, and then we had a brief discussion on the bottom. At least for me, I've already kind of given it away. My bottom has changed, and my top has not really changed. But we're going to go through all the classes and what we think kind of the class rankings are right now. If you guys are wondering when our actual official LOE class rankings are going to come out, it's going to come out before the end of the year, definitely. But I just want to make sure the meta is really stable before we put it out, right? Because otherwise I have to keep changing it. And I'm really hoping to only change this thing once, between now and when the next expansion comes out, just to kind of update it halfway through.
Yep.
So very top. Are you still with Rogue or are you with Mage? Or are you with Paladin now because you love Keeper of Oldemon that much?
See, okay. I really do like Paladin, but I think Keeper is not enough to have Paladin over the other two. So the top three classes, I don't think we're in disagreement here about what the top three classes are, which are Rogue, Mage, and Paladin in some order. Do you agree?
Yep.
Now, as for the specific order, if you force me to choose, I think Mage would be number one right now. And I think Rogue is number two, mostly because it has a really insanely good matchup against Paladin. And I think Paladin is number three there. And we can talk about that. But what's your order?
I think Mage is number one by far more than you think Mage is number one.
Yeah. Okay.
It's just, Ethereal, I'm pronouncing it right this time.
You are.
Ethereal Conjure is just flat out insane when you have the board.
Ridiculous.
And it's also finding you the answer to help you live when you're off the board. And all the other Mage cards are still there. They're still good. It's not like Mage had the most amazing cards in TGT, that the lack of TGT bonus is hurting it. And it's just kind of jumped back, for me, to the top of the game again. And Rogue was at the top of the game in part because TGT had a lot of good stuff. We saw how good Undercity Valiant kind of performed. And we also, Buccaneer, obviously. And now you just kind of have Pit Snake, which is good, but that's not as good as what they were getting in TGT. And the matchup against Paladins has certainly decreased. We were talking about just diversity, right? Which cuts in on Paladin. And more than just diversity, Mage rising again cuts down on Paladin. And so you're kind of on your matchup side. It's still Rogue still has one of the best matchups against almost any class, but you're no longer getting this absurd Paladin matchup really frequently. So all that kind of pushes Rogue down for me. And I feel like I have an easier time dealing with Rogues now too, because the flexibility is back. And when you have the flexibility being back, you kind of pit your skill against the skill of the Rogue. And a lot of Rogues mismanage their health totals with that dagger and their other weapons, and it screws them up.
I think it's equal now how much I fear Rogues and Paladins, but in a different way. And the fear is just kind of Paladins are now capable of doing something that Rogues could do before, in which you have this one big swing turn, right? Where you think you're okay, and then suddenly Rogues do a huge swing turn, and it could be early on in the game, just backstab. Turn 3, and then backstab, coin, SI agent, and Undercity Valiant, right? And then suddenly that's huge burst damage, and they have a 3/3 and 3/2, something crazy like that, right?
You need 2 coins for that, but okay.
Okay, sorry.
No
We all
wonder it's
know
a
I
big
can't
swing
count.
turn. You got 40% more mana than your opponent.
Sure, sure. Let's say you have a cut purse in your on the
Sure,
board as
yeah,
well.
you've already coined out a cut purse and it's been attacking this whole time without being removed. You just
There you go.
win. But yeah, I mean I agree about
But
yeah.
yeah, so with the Paladin as well. Now, a lot of times you fear it's like, okay, you know what? If they have Outdoor Peacekeeper, then that's really bad for my board. But at the same time, like that's a rare card, number one, right? Outdoor
Hmm.
Peacekeeper is a rare card, and number two, you're just like, okay, I can handle that. And like, how many outdoors can this guy have in his deck, right? I mean, famous last words, but that's the thing. But now it's Outdoor Peacekeeper plus Keeper of Oldham Man,
Yeah.
and lots of times like being able to put a 3/3 on his own guy and kill off like your 2/3 as well as just
Keeper of Oldham makes dudes so much more powerful and
yes.
so much more scary because so often before you would like remove the other stuff or remove the dude and think, okay, now I'm just afraid of Blessing of Kings. Well, now in addition to Blessing of Kings, you're also afraid of Keeper of Oldemon on a whole different level. Like, I still don't know the effective way. Like, the way to play around Paladin has definitely shifted so much
It
in
is.
OE.
Yep. And that's what I'm always afraid of. And we talked about this in previous Lightforges, where you fundamentally change the identity of a class, right? And we talked
Yep.
about this with Druid a lot of times, and you were just like, it's a little bit scary how Druid has been changing throughout the expansions.
Hmm.
Scary not as in kind of like super power creep, or scary as in kind of like they're getting too
Yeah,
powerful or too
Scary isn't getting
underpowered.
faster.
Yeah, they're getting faster, and that's not what Druid did.
Yep.
And you can say that, like, sure, that all right, uh, naturally a class has to grow, but each class has to have some boundaries, right? Like, you want
Yeah.
to think of classes as sort of they do this well and they do this not so well, and that's just the give and take of the class. You have to deal
Hmm.
with it. And we don't want all the classes to be the same, right? And
Yep.
we're still far away from that. But
Hmm.
you want to kind of really analyze this creep, analyze this kind of encroachment into other classes' sort of territories, and saying like, all right, like, is this acceptable? Maybe it's acceptable now, but in 2 expansions, if it keeps on going, like, what's going to be the real difference between, like, let's say Druid and Hunter, right, or something like that.
Hmm.
So this is
Yep.
something
Yep.
that we
When druids and hunters become the same, that is when Hearthstone's in trouble, and you can see it, right? Druid's getting beastly, and it's getting more early game, and that used to be kind of the hunters thing. Hunter's always been a weird class to me because I feel like in designing the hunter, Blizzard really just like had no idea what they were doing. And then they're just kind of trying to throw pieces together to make it fit, and it's always a problem in constructed because of that hero power. And in arena, they kind of just like, well, it's not good, it's bad, but it's not so bad because it has that hero power still, so we're just gonna leave it. So I don't know. I think hunter is probably the least cared for class in the arena. Let's put it that way.
I agree. I'm just waiting for Blizzard to give hunters like
Ironbark
uh,
Protector for that control hunter.
yeah, basically give them that, and for I guess for druids they'll give them like what would be the worst thing to give druids, like Hunter's Mark, right? Like something that would be so dumb to give
Yeah,
them.
yeah.
Hunter's Mark for druid would just
Oh
be
god.
completely
Okay,
broken.
so one thing they can never give Druid is that they can never give him more reach. Because the combo already exists in constructed. So unless they retire the combo somehow, they're not going
Yeah.
to give the druid more reach, or else you're just, you're like making horrible design decisions at that point. So we don't have to worry about that in terms of it becoming like the hunter. But yeah, something like a hunter's mark, that would be awful.
Yeah.
It's, when you have swipe as part of the class card that you will always pick.
Right.
Yeah, so okay. So we've gone over the top three. I think Mage is definitely on top, and then it's either Paladin or Rogue. Probably Rogue is still ahead of Paladin. I need to play more to really be sure. And fourth, I don't think anyone is really going to argue with Druid. It has the hero power. It still has all the powerful cards. It got the Raptor, which is a powerful 3-drop in LOE. It has a Raven Idol, which is a powerful card, even though it's not going to define any particular deck.
Yep.
So now we're moving on to the 5th and 6th class, which in my mind is now definitely the Warlock, because like we keep talking about flexibility, right? Well, the
Yeah,
Warlock's
we do.
hero power gives you one end game, and so the Warlock actually has no flexibility. But when everyone else is built on flexibility, if you could do one thing really well, so the way to defeat a Warlock is to get on the board, clear the Warlock's board, and that's it. So obviously everyone's trying to do that in the beginning. That's not really something that you're worried about, right? Like you can strategize against a hunter, you can strategize against a priest, but with the Warlock, it's kind of like priest in that sense, right? You can either do it or you can't. But once you get the Warlock on the board, and now the Warlock has a really like a much easier way to keep that early momentum going with Dark Peddler, and I think that's one of the key things. In the same way that
Yeah.
Imp Gang Boss like kind of revolutionized the Warlock, right?
Mm-hmm.
Dark Peddler makes it so you can get that 1 mana spell that pushes your tempo and solves the problem, or it's still like a top level 3-drop if you get a 2/2 and a 2/1. On turn 3. So the flexibility on the drops helps a lot, because as the Warlock, that dreadful feeling, right? Like when you miss a turn 2 or turn 3 drop, and you're just like,
Yeah.
well, it's kind of the board right there, and without the board, what am I doing, right? Like how many Shadow Flames and Hellfires do I have? Now you're kind of lowering the percentages of that, and that's one of the easiest ways to make a class better without just printing ridiculously powerful cards, right? You add consistency to its biggest weakness. Warlocks need the board in the very beginning. You eliminate that weakness by giving it another 3-drop, and then you make the 3-drop overpowered by saying, well, if you don't need it for a 3-drop, you actually get one of your tempo cards. And what does your tempo card do? It helps you keep the board, and or even get back on it with a Soulfire or something.
Yeah, definitely. Dark Peddler, I think, has been really good, and you see, kind of the top classes are the classes that have either been historically very good or have gotten really good cards in the expansion, or both, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like with Paladins and Mages, they got good cards and they were also historically good. But with Warlocks, we see that they were always kind of middle of the pack, right? Their hero power was always very good for the late game, and they got a premium card in Dark Peddler. So it wasn't enough to push them over the edge. I agree with your ranking them right after the top 4 classes. I think it's number 5. So I think Warlock is thoroughly entrenched in there. And you make a good point. It's hard to play around a lot of the Warlock cards. Power overwhelming, a lot of times you just can't eliminate everything on their board, right? And then you just say to yourself, all right, well, power overwhelming is just going to wreck me here because it's a huge tempo play. Yeah. Shadow Flame, you can never play around Shadow Flame. It's something that is impossible to predict. So,
like, one of the things you want to think about, like, just comparing Warlock to Priest, because both have essentially infinite card advantage, more so than other classes by the end. And Warlocks can get it no matter what the board state is. Like, if you're fighting for the board, you can still hero power. With Priest, you need something that you can reasonably heal to get that power. And Warlocks have all these early cards that help it get the board. Priests kind of have nothing. They kind of have to, they're at the mercy for you to leave them with something on the board that they can then buff. So that's a very huge difference between how the Warlock, like the consistency of being able for the Warlock's hero power to really trigger and help you versus the Priest's hero power to really trigger and help you. And it's kind of balanced out by the fact that Priests just have way better cards than Warlocks as far as class cards go. But Warlock is still so far ahead of Priest that you can just kind of tell how important that flexibility of the hero power is. And this is not to say that Warlocks have a flexible hero power, it's just that Priests have the most inflexible hero power. Of the classes that actually have a hero power, so I take Warrior aside.
Right. And one hero power incentivizes you to, kind of just tempo out hard in the beginning of the game, right? Like 1 drops, 2 drops, 1 drop plus a 2 drop. While with the Priest, if you keep on doing that, you make your hero power useless almost. Yep. So you have to play you have to walk this very tight rope like this as a Priest. And that's really tough because you're probably going to miss a drop.
Yep. So we talk about Warlock as not the most flexible class to play, but it's a very flexible class to draft. And
Yes.
Priest is just not flexible at all. It's even less flexible to play, and it's not flexible to draft either. So this flexibility is still coming into play here. And then number 6, I would put as the Warrior. I'm so sold on the Warrior right now. I may even put it above the Warlock. And we said it doesn't have a hero power, right? But all the other cards, its entire playstyle, plays right into the whole flexibility meta that we're kind of in right now, where you could go really early. You could definitely get the cards to go really early board control, and you do want to do that. But now you have this whole late game dimension where you have the Fierce Monkey, which is a taunt and a high value for 3 mana taunt at that, even in the late game. And you have Obsidian Destroyer. How good is that card? It just
Ridiculous.
stops your opponent's game plan, dead,
Yeah.
as long as you're even just fighting for the board. And it's a huge body. And now the Warrior can compete in the late game. It used to not be able to compete at all because you're just going to get out card advantaged, and you're still going to get out card advantaged, except if you have an Obsidian Destroyer alive on the board for several turns, that's free dudes every turn. You kind of make up for that hero power on the card advantage if you get your Obsidian Destroyers. And you've always had Arcanite Reaper and Death Spite as kind of insane card advantage cards if you can take the health hit. And now you have a way to protect it. It's all kind of coming together for the Warrior in the arena. You just have to figure out how to use it, and you have to figure out how each game is going and what your win conditions are. It's always been one of the hardest classes to play because you have to swing back and forth so much, and you really don't have the tools that other classes that kind of have this philosophy have, right? Mage is, I think, very similar to the Warrior in terms of its flexibility, except you have so many more tools as the Mage that you have as the Warrior. And other classes just aren't that flexible. So the Warrior takes the Mage's flexibility in terms of the cards that it's given and how it can win the game, and it just kind of doesn't have that hero power, and the cards are less powerful. So it's not anywhere near the Mage, but this is how you win as the Warrior. And I have done it so many times. I've seen it done so many times. I kid you not. Warrior is our highest average on stream since LoE started by such a long shot, and we played it more often than any other class. It's almost 10 wins per run.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I think part of the strength comes from you can't just look at the cards individually, right? Obsidian Destroyer is a very good card. Fierce Monkey is a very good card, but you can't just say, oh, it's because of just these 2 cards, Warrior is so good. A lot of it comes from the fact that, so we talked about this before, how the meta is obviously slower than it has been historically. It's not super slow anymore, right? It's not super slow. We're at a good spot right now. It's very kind of mid-rangey. And Warrior is very good at playing this, where you can use your health, you can use your weapons, and Obsidian Destroyer offers this thing that it never had before, which is this late game closer, but this late game value oriented minion as well, right? That puts immediate pressure. It's kind of like a Murloc. It's got kind of like a Murloc Knight effect, right? Where you're incentivized to remove it immediately, because if you don't remove it, they're going to get value out of it every single turn. And the value is something that Warriors really like, which is a ping, kind of it's like a pseudo ping, right?
Exactly. Yep. It's the type of value that you're missing as the Warrior.
Exactly. So you have big damage and you have medium damage, and with Obsidian Destroyer, you impact the board by putting out this annoying 1/1, and you
know how much I hate Annoyotron. This is endless Annoyotrons. You get 2 Obsidian Destroyers out there, it's GG.
Definitely. So I think those factors put together with the quality of the cards, and I would agree. I think that Warrior is in the slot right after Warlock.
Okay, so then we have a consensus bottom 3 of Shaman, Hunter, Priest in some kind of order. I don't want to go too much into it. We did it last time. We all thought Priest was at the bottom. I don't want to get into how bad the Priest sucks. We'll do that in some other Lightforge. But you wanted to say something about the Hunter. And we'll talk about Shaman at the end of this Lightforge, because we're about to play a Shaman today.
Sure. Yeah, something I want to talk about Hunter is, if you guys watch the stream, you guys know how much I love playing Hunter. And in my opinion, I think I've had a pretty good grasp of the Hunter class and how aggressive you have to be. and sort of how you need to draft, because it's a difficult class to draft and to play, but I think the upside is very high, or was very high. Now, sadly, I think the hunter has gotten weaker since LOE has come out. Part of it is just because of kind of how the meta has changed, but part of it is also the hunter cards are really bad, really bad.
Yes, really bad.
And
Like insanely bad, like warrior level bad.
Dart Trap, the 5 damage, you can't control where it goes. Sometimes you're happy if it goes like to the face as well. Sometimes you're not, but they can just kind of delay it, right? They can delay it. And with any secret in which they could delay, you're losing value and you're losing sort of the effect of that, because you're paying your 2 mana now, and then they kind of like you cash in on the effect many turns later. So, like with any good investment, if it's down the line, you want to be huge, and 5 random damage is not huge.
Yep.
And then there's Desert Camel. Ooh. So Desert Camel, the 3 mana 2/4 beast that pulls a 1 mana minion from both of your decks. Now, as a hunter, you're probably going to have 1 mana minions, because you're probably going to try to be a little bit more aggressive. Now the problem is when you pull the minion for your opponent as well, everyone drafts 1-drops now. Everyone knows the value of Worgen Infiltrator. They know the value of Zombie Chow. Like even something like Abusive Sergeant, right, is very good. People draft that. The problem you have with Desert Camel is sometimes with Hunter, you have to reach down for 1-drops to kind of play this aggressive style that I think you should, and you should preferably be playing as Hunter. So sometimes you're going to pull out their Zombie Chow, and you're going to have like a Murloc Raider or something, right? And that is just really bad. You don't have initiative with your 2/1. They're going to have initiative, like, they get to use their 1-drop before you get to use your 1-drop. And it's so rare now that you like don't pull something out of your opponent's deck as well. And it helps them in so many ways. They're going to pull out a premium 1 more often than you. And now you make their draws better. And their deck is always going to be bigger than yours. So you've like helped them in all these different ways. And it's just, there are times in which Desert Camel can be a net positive for you. But after playing it quite a few times, I see that like the negatives they're pretty bad. And it's just not a good card.
Yep. I mean, I agree. I would put Hunter definitely down there. We'll talk about Shaman afterwards. Let's move on for now to question from the GOAT. What's today's question from the GOAT, Merps?
All right. So it's the holiday season. I think we're all in the mood. And I just want to open this up and ask you, ADWCTA, what are you thankful for in Hearthstone?
In Hearthstone, what am I thankful for?
Yes.
I mean, you guys know what I'm thankful for. The Warrior is back. The Warrior is so back in the arena. I'm having insane amounts of fun with the Warrior in the arena, and that has been like I don't think like I knew that I really missed it, but it doesn't really quite hit you. You could watch, like, we have the 12. The first time I played Warrior in LE, I got 12 wins, and I have it on a video on YouTube, and you could just see how giddy I was, like just playing the Warrior again and having everything kind of work again. Because it was always my favorite class to play, arena, constructed, whatever. So that's what I'm thankful for. As far as Hearthstone goes, I'm thankful that Blizzard, hashtag Arena Warriors matter. This is the quickest, like, beyond my expectations at any stage of this thing. And, now I'm very, very satisfied with where the Warrior is in the arena right now. And that's unexpected, right? That's something that, like, if I don't know, like, they're going to put out a new expansion every 4 months. It's not really much to be thankful for there. It's kind of just the baseline expectation, but it could have taken them like a year to fix the Warrior in the arena, right? Like, that could have easily happened. And to get it done, like, kind of 3 months since everybody started vocalizing it together in unison, that's really amazing. And just, I mean, OE in general is just very well done too. In terms of the card pool.
Yeah. So, guys, I think what I'm most thankful for is just kind of the complexity of the game. I like to think that I'm a pretty good Hearthstone arena player, but at the same time, I still make a good amount of mistakes. It could be simple mistakes like adding. That might be something I might never improve on. But also, big
It's been so many
macro.
years, Merps.
It's
I think it would have happened if it was going to happen.
That's true. That's true. Well, we could always hope, right? That miraculously I hit my head and I'm a mathematical genius and I can finally add like 7 and 3 and 4
You knock
together.
loose that thing that was blocking your brain.
Yeah, that crayon I stuck up my nose when I was in like kindergarten or something. But yeah, so I'm thankful for the complexity of the game, and I'm thankful that I'm still learning about this game. And it's it's gratifying and also kind of like scary in a way in which like I can be good at this game but still make so many mistakes, right? And
Yeah,
then
yeah, right.
it just shows that there's like so much left to
Hmm.
learn and so much uncharted territory and for myself. And I know that there's a lot of good players out there, and it's very exciting that a lot of them are good at what I am. Like they're good at this thing that I am not as good at, so I
Hmm.
have much to improve in those areas. So that's really cool. And with a game like this, we all joke that RNG takes no skill, wizard poker,
It's
but
so complicated that there's
very
so
complicated.
much, and like what we're really focused on is just getting to be good evaluators of what is right and wrong, even if we're not making the right moves. Because otherwise, all you know is that there are differences. Like two really good players would make a different move in this situation.
Yep.
Like the really hard part is figuring out. Well, clearly one of them is right,
Yes.
like it's not going to be exactly 50-50. It's going to be like 51-49 at best, but probably like 55-45. And if you could figure out which one that is, then you can start like learning. But we're not even necessarily at that point yet. This is what's so like amazing about the arena and such untapped potential. Like there are a lot of times where I'm making like 35-65 decisions wrong until someone points it out, and I'm like, oh yeah, I was totally gonna do that stupid thing.
Right. And these
Um,
are 65-35
yeah,
moves. Yeah.
and just if you can fix that in your play, you become a much better player. So we both have like a lot of room to grow, which is kind of scary because I think we're like already really good players, and just to have that room to grow, it's just such a complicated game. That's one of the reasons why the randomness in the arena is so attractive, right? The
Yes.
roguelike features of it, it doesn't get to the point where you're like so like mechanical and like math oriented with the charts and everything. It'll never get to that point, and that's what's kind of magical about the arena. And it means that improvement gets slower and slower, but it will never ever stop or become so microscopic that it doesn't matter, even for the top players. So yeah, no, I agree. I'm thankful for that too. Okay, so just to let you guys know, so a question from the goat, and the goat is our Patreon kind of. I don't know. It's our logo, our mascot, and we are fully supported by our patrons, and we have no sponsors or anything like that. So if you would like to support the Lightforge, feed the goat, head over to patreon.com/grinninggoat and make a pledge. It'll really help us out, and will really help us get into the holiday spirit.
Yeah.
Car Good Bad is up next, but before we do that, I want to say that next week we're actually going to drill back down. So I'm going to talk about the arc again with what we see the Lightforge is doing. We're going to try to have a guest on every month. That's going to happen, but in terms of the rest of the arc, we have the hype for the expansion arc, followed by the what the hell did this expansion do to the meta arc, following the meta as it settles, and then we go back to like teaching, kind of like drilling really deep into fundamental distinctions that people may either take for granted or not fully realize why they're doing what they're doing, to like help you figure out when you make a decision and it's different from a streamer or something, whether that is a 60-40 decision or a 55-45 decision, or like you're just wrong or right or whatever kind of decision. And we've done stuff in the past. If you guys are new to the Life Forge, you may want to go back and look at the episode on like the coin, or the episode on 2 3s versus 3 2s. The meta hasn't changed that much that stuff would be different, and I think that's very helpful. And we're going to try to squeeze in one of those episodes for next week,
Yeah.
before we go back to the whole like OE meta thing. Okay, so Car Good Bad, we're picking today the Demolisher. which I know is a favorite of our stream fans because we have gotten just like such good results with the Demolisher on average compared to where we rank it. Where do we rank it? It's like 50?
Yeah, it's around there.
It's
Something
definitely
like
below
that.
a 2-3. I think it's like a 50 or like a 46 or something. It's below your normal 2 drop. But when it works, right? It's an infinite engine of 2 damage per turn. And that's kind of insane. And even if it doesn't work, a 1/4 is kind of worth 2 mana, so you're just kind of giving up 1 mana's worth, which is not the most awful thing considering its upside, right?
Yeah.
Like, the upside is not Keeper of Oldemon. You give up 1 mana's worth of stats in order to do something ridiculous, but you keep it alive on the board, you can very quickly get the tempo and the value from a very early turn.
Yeah.
So, card good, bad, Merps. I mean, the answer is card okay, but let's explain when it's good, when it's bad, and why. Like, what if you have a Demolisher in your deck? What are you trying to do, and how can it win you the game? And when should you like kind of not let it lose you the game?
Sure. So what you want to try to do if you have a Demolisher in your deck is you should just do the thing you're supposed to do, which is get on the board first, right? We always preach board initiative and board presence. And if you have that, the fact that you put out a Demolisher, so what's kind of the gold standard for 3 drops? It's a Spider Tank, right? You have a 3/4 for 3 mana. So you're missing two stats here. And it doesn't matter if you're missing those 2 stats if you're getting 2 damage every single turn. But the downside of Demolisher is that if they're attacking into you, or if you're attacking with the Demolisher, you're missing that 2 attack. So what you want to do is get on the board so that they can't, kind of hit your Demolisher. They can't easily kill it, and then you can generate value turn after turn with a Demolisher. Hopefully, it hits the right thing. Even if it doesn't, just go to the face. There you go. But yeah, that's what you want to do with the Demolisher. Get on the board, protect your Demolisher. Easier said than done, right? And the downside is kind of whenever let's say you go to turn 3 and they put out a 3/3, and you're just like, oh man, I really wish I had that 3/4 Spider Tank to put out to be able to kill them off and anti-tempo them by forcing them to hero power. Now with this 1/4, it gets a little bit awkward, right?
Yeah. But I want to point out that the great part about 1/4 is that 4 health is actually a lot at that stage.
It is.
It may very well be possible that he just has a more powerful minion on the board and he still can't remove your Demolisher. So at some point you have to like just not worry about you can't always get the board. So at some point putting out the Demolisher, even though it's anti-tempo if they kill it, you can get the tempo kind of back because you're forcing them to attack that target rather than your other targets. Because if they keep the Demolisher on the board and it hits one of his good targets, and then you snowball that the next turn, and then you get the board, well, then the Demolisher is only going to hit more and more things, and your opponent kind of loses the game. So if he's a good player, he's aware of that, and he really wants to remove your Demolisher. So if he has like 2 attack on the board, you put out a Demolisher, even if your Demolisher can't kill his 2/3, you're feeling pretty good no matter what happens.
Sure.
His 2/3 can actually kill your Demolisher, but you're going to be able to take that risk, and you're going to be happy that he can't pull any shenanigans afterwards. Because because your next minion will be well set up to kind of help take back the board. So it's not the best tempo play, but it's also not like I'm gonna hold this card in my hand forever. Like the key thing with the Demolisher is you have to recognize how worthless it is if you don't have the board. So
Yes.
playing it for the awkwardness or for the 4 taunt on the board or just for the 1 damage that it deals is oftentimes the correct decision when you're behind on the board. If you don't have other kind of plays to play, or if you want to wait and set up a super tempo turn to get the board back, or if you have something that you want to protect because it has a soft taunt on it.
Right. Sometimes it's going to be a Silverback Patriarch, and you just have to accept it.
Yep. Which is not a good card, but it has a lot of upside if you're fighting for the board.
Exactly.
And you're not behind. So that's the Demolisher. We may move it up a little, but it's not. It's not like a. It's just a card that has a very interesting way to play it, and we see people misplay it all the time, like against us, where we're like, "Why did you do that? Like, why did you put it out, or why didn't you put it out earlier, or why didn't you protect it that much, or why are you protecting it so much?" It takes a lot of like anticipation and thinking and planning out your turn to be able to get the most value out of it. And then when you do get the most value out of it, on average, it's still not the best card. So that's why it's not better than like a 2-3 or a 3-2, but it could be good, right? Like, and
Yes.
it's good enough that you'll pick it now and then. And so that's why you should really know how to use this card to its max potential, because you will pick it now and then. Like, we could do like how do you get the most value out of Raid Leader or out of Thrallmar Farseer, but it doesn't matter because you're not really going to pick those cards all that often. Demolisher, you will. Okay. Shaman. Let's end this on a downer. How bad is Shaman, and why are we playing it after this Lightforge?
Well, the reason we play it is not because we like the class, and also not because we're good with the class, even though I did just get a 12-0.
You used up all your luck.
I know, I should have saved it for this one. It's okay. We'll try to get a Power Mason win. Um, so the reason we play it is just because we try to play the classes evenly, and Shaman came up. What can I say? But as for the Shaman class itself, part of the problem has always been consistency. And you have a lot of inconsistencies with the Shaman. You have inconsistencies with the hero power. You have inconsistencies with the draft in because there are some cards that you kind of need as the Shaman. It's almost unfair how much they swing the way that you play Flame Tongue Totem, right?
Yep.
If you have a Flame Tongue Totem, it makes your hero power much more worthwhile. It makes them much more useful. If you don't have a Flame Tongue, suddenly you're just sort of, it's like, oh, maybe I can roll a taunt, that could be good. Maybe a healing totem, that could be decent.
That new card, the thing that's a 3/6.
Oh yeah, Thunder Bluff, sure. If you have that as well, yeah. I mean that's in the same kind of same manner as the Flame Tongue Totem, and you have your inconsistency with the spells as well, like Crackle.
Yeah.
You know, good Crackle, you win the game. Bad Crackle, you lose the game. So inconsistency is one thing that players should not like, because you don't want a kind of large standard deviation for your wins, because you could just easily flame out at 3-3, right? Like it could have been a 12-win deck, but because you had two bad Crackles, suddenly you lost, and that's never a good feeling. That's never something you want as a good player. You want consistency, and Shaman just doesn't provide that.
Yeah, and it kind of feels to me whenever I play Shaman that I'm like a warlock. Like I have these weird small removals that are good, but they're not what's going to win me the game most likely. I have a bunch of minions that are overpowered, but they're kind of awkward, sort of, and I don't have too many of them. And then in the end, the Warlock has that hero power that solves all problems, and the Shaman has a hero power that is very conditional on one of their top cards existing in your hand to solve any problems. And the only upside for the Shaman that I see, and that I think most people see, is that one, they have a Hex. That's the best hard removal in the game, hands down. Which kind of brings the class back a bit. And then it has a Fire Elemental, which is just kind of one of the best cards in the game, hands down.
Yes.
And so that's just super overpowered. And so that's why it ends up being kind of a weird thing, right? Like when you're playing a Shaman, you're just very dependent on getting your cards. I still think you're in a much better situation than the Priest, because Priests have to get their cards and the situation has to be right. Shamans need to get their cards, and then the board situation doesn't matter as much. Like, you're much more flexible in terms of, you can even kind of totem out when you have other stuff on the board. If your other stuff threatens their stuff, they'll remove the stuff, and they won't remove your totems. And then you can still build a totem train even when you're fighting for the board, and the totems are technically, no tempo on the board for the most part. So you do have some more flexibility there than the Priest, with a similar level of powerful cards, kind of carrying your draft. So I like it better than the Priest for that reason. I don't like it much more than that. I still have to play a little more Hunter before I can say whether Shaman or Hunter is better right now. But it's just always And the thing with shaman and hunter, right, where like we were talking about this last week, there are very few people who will step out and say like, oh yeah, priest is my best class, or like one of my top two classes, and who are really really good arena players. And there are a lot of people who will actually say that about like shaman and hunter.
Yeah, that is true.
And so you kind of see the skill cap being decently high for those, and it could just be like, I know we're self-admittedly not the best shaman players out there. I don't even know if we can average 7 wins per run with shaman. Maybe we can now. I don't know. We used to be able to, and then things happened. Things happened.
I like that. Love it.
So now we've converged onto this. Whatever we're doing doesn't work as well for shaman as other classes, but shaman works well for other people, so we're still in the learning phase. I think we've gotten a lot better with it over the course of LOE, but it still feels like a very kind of iffy class with RNG built into it. Whereas Hunter, no matter what you want to say about it, it's kind of single dimensional. It has a little more flexibility, I think, than what Merps gives it credit for, but at least it does its job very well. So you're limited, but you're focused, right?
Yeah.
Priest is limited, but you are not in control of whether you can hit your focus or not. And Shaman is much more flexible than these two classes, but it's overall like you have to piece things together and play it very well.
Definitely.
So I think it's definitely like kind of one of the higher skill classes. That like we said, right? We're hoping to learn and improve in some things, and Shaman is one of those areas.
All right, I think that's a pretty good breakdown of Shaman. We've also talked about Shaman previously, and I don't think much will change with it. They really need to do some. Look, we said this with Warrior, right? They're like, oh, there's no possible way it can be changed in one expansion. No, we've seen a lot of progress with Warrior, so we could see the same thing with Shaman.
I don't know how they did that with the Warrior, by the way, and I don't know if they knew that was the effect that was going to have. But that Warrior transformation, oh my god. Like, everyone... Really, when we were reviewing the Warrior for LOE, I was looking at everyone else's reviews too. Like, we were by far the most gung-ho about the Warrior being back in the arena meta after LOE, after seeing the cards. And we were wrong. It is, like, way more back than even where we thought it was going to be.
Right.
So,
and guys,
someone's doing something right, when it comes to these evaluations.
So Warrior is kind of mid-level now, like number 6.
Lower mid-level.
Yeah, lower mid-level. And I think it was just a perfect storm, right? Yeah. And with the meta changing and with the cards that they were...
Yeah. I think one thing I heavily underestimated was the effect of having the TGT offering rates go away on the Warrior, because they were like killing the Warrior so hard with like Bolster and that crap.
You'd be offered Bolster 5 times during the draft. So that's basically 5 choices that were just gone.
Yeah. And like, I don't know what they can do with the Shaman for that, because the solution is not the same as the Warrior. The solution is, but the solution for the Warrior was pretty creative, right? They focused on their taunt mechanic that they're trying to put in. They gave a late game element and an early game board element. They didn't even add a weapon, and it worked out. It definitely worked out. So with the Shaman, who knows what direction they'll take. But I have more confidence now in Blizzard than I definitely did at any other point, except like at launch. I had like a lot of faith in Blizzard at the launch of Hearthstone, and then nothing happened for a little way too long, and then it's just kept slipping. And I don't know if I'm back at that level of confidence in Blizzard yet, but I'm getting much closer to there than I used to be, with the way the whole Warrior turned out and the way the arena is kind of balanced. From what I hear, Constructed, also good vibes coming out. So good job, Blizzard, and hopefully in the next iteration of in the next kind of expansion, and they're always like an expansion behind, almost like half an expansion behind when they come to these balancing things. So right. Shaman used to be really bad, so maybe they have more good stuff in plan for the Shaman for the next expansion. But for now, it's definitely one of our classes in need of help, right? Hunter, Priest, Shaman. And we kind of knew Hunter, well, Priest we definitely knew was, like, we saw LOE and we were like, yeah, Priest is going to need some help. Hunter, we kind of had a little higher expectations for, but the reality didn't pan out, and Shaman is kind of where we think it was going to be too.
Yeah. So we'll see, and we'll also see where the meta is going to go, if it's going to go anywhere at all. But you guys, rest assured, we'll be playing a lot of Hearthstone.
All right. So I think that's it for today. This is ADWCTA.
This is Merps. Thank you guys. Take care.
Happy holidays.